I'm your host, and my name is Akbar Jaffer. I'm the founder and CEO of MQA, Marketing Quality Assurance. I spent the first half of my career as a software engineer and really focused on building the enterprise products. And then the second half of my career, really fixing and optimizing marketing and product organizations for startups, small and mid-sized companies, and Fortune 1000 companies. The idea behind MQA is really simple. Profitability is directly proportional to your marketing quality. The quality of your strategy, your processes, your products that you build, and increasingly, the quality of the context you feed into your AI tools. That last part is exactly what today is all about. Here's the problem that we're going to unpack in the session today. Really, AI has made building the software radically cheaper and faster. But it hasn't really made us better at knowing what actually is worth building. Teams are shipping more and winning less because the bottleneck didn't disappear. It shifted. It shifted from the engineering capacity to product judgment. And that gap is precisely what our speaker has spent his career closing. Now, it's a pleasure to introduce the presenter today, Anthony Argenziano, the founder and CEO of Velociti, the AI product operating system. Anthony has spent about 2 decades building products at startups, at eBay and Amazon, and kept running into the same thing everywhere he went. Teams that could execute beautifully, shipping products nobody wanted. Velociti is what he built in response. It has more than 100 paying customers today. I've had the privilege and a pleasure of mentoring Anthony earlier in his career and watching him build Velociti from an idea into a platform product leaders now rely on. This has genuinely been a highlight of my work. He's going to spend the next half hour on something I suspect the audience will feel immediately. Why the AI has made us faster at building, but without making us better at choosing what we build. Anthony, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Akbar. Appreciate that. Hello, everyone. Yeah, I'm just gonna jump right in and talk about let me start with this, what you should leave with, right? Really, a model on understanding what Akbar was laying out for us, which is the bottleneck moving from building, i.e., the how, to judgment or the what. So we're going to dig into that. And also a cool little kind of diagnostic tool or process, really just your context readiness ladder and understanding where you are and 5 things you can do today, this week, and none of them require you to buy anything. So let's start off with the problem. Again, as we've said a couple of times now, the bottleneck moved, right? But the operating system didn't. Product teams are still working on the old ways that they were doing product management, product discovery, which honestly, in most cases, was they never had a system for this, and it was very inconsistently done or done well. So, because what happened is if there was an operating system before, it was built around the old way of doing things. So we built an operating system around the new bottleneck. So looking at the constraint we designed for, right, was in the past was really around build capacity. That's why Scrum was so important. It was so popular, right? It was built around sprint planning, backlog grooming, all of the ceremonies, right? But it was around capacity and it was around really a bit of a glorified project management. And the constraint we have now is what problem is worth solving? For who? And how are we solving that problem? Are we solving it in a way that our potential users will want to use the solution, right? What won't we build? And the last thing that we built, did that work, right? And that kind of decisioning and really deeply understanding the what, they're currently outside of Velocity is there's just no system to do that. Um, and that's why that's just such a big reason why that is now the constraint. The other part of this is the cost of building collapsed, right? We can build faster and easier than ever, but the cost of being wrong didn't collapse. In fact, it went up significantly. The one I guess valuable part of building slower pre AI is you might be able to catch some of those things earlier on in the process. Not talking about code quality or defects that you may have missed the mark or didn't really you weren't really building to the problem. So as we get faster and faster to build and deploy, you're not finding these problems out, until it's already in production, it's downstream. So again, cost down, cost of building down, but cost of being wrong, uh, likely to start increasing exponentially. And think about this, right? There's two, well, one of them is here, but I'll talk to the other one. There's two key metrics that I talk about often. One is this, that 80% of shipped features are rarely or never used. Not 80% are used. 80% are rarely or never used, right? And the other key stat is 75% of all new products, new software products fail, right? They fail to meet their intended outcome and goal. Not surprising that those two numbers are aligned. Well, think of times that by 10x, right? Because we can build at scale now with AI, maybe times 100, but even just look at 10x, right? You're producing things people don't want even faster, right? You've built a more efficient way to create waste. And again, that applies to the features that don't get used, and subsequently the products that don't land. Again, AI didn't fix the hit rate, so we're still at those same percentages. It's just making the problem exponentially worse. But it's not discipline. It's not the ability to build, right? I always, want to be really clear. I don't think product managers and product teams, I don't think they don't have discipline. I don't think they don't care. Um, it's structural, right? There's no system to do this. And it's kind of ironic, I suppose, that AI really rushed to quote unquote fix something that wasn't really a problem and hasn't been a problem for many, many years. Again, writing code, we've figured that out, right? We've perfected that. Now with AI, we've commoditized it, but that hasn't been the challenge. The challenge has been around the what. And both pre and post AI, the challenges for product managers and product teams, it's pretty much the same. It's that they're constantly fighting fires, right? They're responding to stakeholder requests. They're doing status and reporting. Don't get me started on the PO role that has emerged over the last 10 to 12 years, right? Just doing things that are not solving the what. And and now this last point here, prompting, right? They're leveraging AI, but you're not going to build a continuously compounding product intelligence layer if you're just constantly prompting. So none of the existing tools really solve this, and there just hasn't been a system. And going a little bit deeper on this, there absolutely is a system for building, right? Jira, Scrum, and running sprints, IDEs for developers, now coding agents for developers, the CI/CD process. Again, there's an amazing system and has been for some time related to the build side of this. But the decision side, the deciding on what you should build and why and for whom and on and on and on, that's still an individual making a decision, trying to, pass that off to an engineer. Often it's done on a hunch because they didn't have time to do strong discovery. So again, like this is probably the most important takeaway from this webinar, that there's a system for building. The how, we're really good at the how. We're just not good at the what, and primarily because there's no system. So what does this all kind of lead us to, right? We've been building to this. Context is the bottleneck. When we say the what, we're talking about context. Everything I mentioned, what is the core problem we're solving? For who? What are their pain points and their jobs to be done? Right? How do they need to use this? Why are we doing this? How does this align with our strategy? I can go on and on and on. That's product management, product discovery. That's context, and ultimately that's the what. So it's not the model, right? There's just like I mentioned, coding is becoming commoditized. You can make the argument that the frontier AI models are becoming commoditized. They're moving so fast, and every time somebody claims some kind of victory or some major achievement, then say that's we all love Fable 5, right? Well, then OpenAI comes with their thing, or one of the open source models, or something out of China, right? It's more and more becoming commoditized. It's not the model, right? And it certainly isn't the prompt. It's the context, because prompting, it's a skill, right? I mean, it's valuable to be good at prompting. There was that whole kind of hype around context engineering. You don't hear that so much these days, but I'm not discounting that. Prompting is a skill, but context is an asset, right? And context compounds, especially if you do this properly. It becomes this product intelligence layer, this living system. You'll never get that from prompting. And then the re-explaining tax. So I think just reading that probably instantly resonates, but let me explain more. So, your AI has amnesia, right? We've all experienced this. The when you're building that memory in a session, maybe you're generating MD files, whatever you're doing in your LLM or in your AI tool, it's really, really difficult for that to be permanent memory. And it certainly doesn't compound. So what you end up doing is every chat session, every coding session, every handoff to dev, you're re-explaining, and it's a tax, and we're all paying that tax, and that's not an AI problem, right? AI is what it is, right? The LLMs and the coding agents, they do what they do. It's a system, it's an architecture problem. How you manage that context so you're not constantly re-explaining, right? Paying that tax. And the other challenge is documents are for humans, right? So the PRD that we have, we've used in product management for many years now. I'm not saying the PRD has zero value, but it doesn't have much value for AI, for the machine to read and execute. It's built for the human, um, and that's where kind of building up to this to the context layer. We talked about this. Prompting doesn't truly persist. You're not going to build memory there. Documents, they drift, they become obsolete, and they're built for humans. A context layer is continually updated. It's compounding. It's your intelligence layer, and it's built. It absolutely provides value for humans, but it's really built for the machine, for coding agents or LLMs. Just it's really built to be machine read. So the four shifts, right? Um, the backlog as the artifact, right? It served us well. It served us well for many years. Scrum and any of the agile methodologies worked well, right? But now we have the context as the artifact, right? It's a big shift. And whereas the backlog was just output, the context is durable, right? Um, then we had documents reading, or excuse me, humans reading documents, right? Now we have the AI coding agents and LLMs reading that context. So we need it to be structured, easily to dispatch or to hand off to coding agents and to AI. But it needs to be structured in the right way, right? And we can't lose context along the way. Um, then discovery as a phase, right? Even though continuous discovery has been around for a while in product management pre AI, we still, for all the challenges that I listed earlier, we still looked at discovery more as a phase. We did it one time, we did it periodically. In this new world, discovery is and needs to be a loop. It needs to be continually running, not just saying, "Hey, we do continuous discovery because, we implement some of the methodology or some of the framework." You need to have a system running discovery as a loop. And finally, the product manager as a ticket writer. As much as we tried to make the product management role really be, I'm sure many of you have heard the quote from Ben Horowitz. The product manager is the CEO of the product, right? Sure, maybe a bit bold and a bit um, you know kind of didn't sit well with maybe other people in a software company, but the idea was right that the product manager should own decisions and own what was built, everything around the product. The problem is it just got very tactical and they became the ticket writer, the scrum master, right? I mentioned the product owner role earlier. None of that gets to the true value of what a product manager should be doing. Now, if we can leverage AI properly, the product manager becomes the context architect. They really are the owner of the what, and they're leveraging AI and the system to make the right decisions. So now, how do you win here, right? This is all about finding your rung. Where are you on this ladder? And then start to move up. Most teams are really on one or two. Hopefully, very few, if any, are on zero. Most of them are on one or two, but they think they're on three. Maybe they don't even truly have a good understanding of four. So starting at the bottom, it's ad hoc. It's you're just documenting things as needed. Maybe you're using an LLM, but you're just prompting away and then it's done, right? It doesn't persist or move on anywhere. And then you get more to maybe templates, right? You're saving your prompts. Maybe you're even building an agent, right? And you're building a library of some of these things, but it doesn't compound. It's not permanent memory, and it's certainly very static. Moving up to documented. So now you're creating a knowledge base, right? You have PRDs, you have personas, you do some research and discovery, and maybe you do a pretty good job of documenting this, but it's not an intelligence layer yet, right? And this is where really, what I'm seeing personally is most companies are at rung two. Now moving up to where the real value is and where you need to be in this era of AI. And that is at minimum that living context layer. All of your insights, your decision, your evidence, your experimentation, your testing, everything lives in this context layer, is fed into this context layer so that it continues to compound. It becomes your product intelligence layer. And I do see teams doing a pretty good job of getting to rung three, but then the holy grail, number four here is dispatchable and traceable, right? And it's just seamlessly flowing this context into AI coding agents and having a full loop, by the way. You need to get the results. If your context leverages your strategy to determine the outcome you're looking for, your desired outcome, and how you're going to measure, well, after that gets deployed, that full loop needs to continue. And you need to pull that back in and say, did we deliver that outcome based on how we said we would measure success, right? That's the holy grail. And that's what I'm I'm just obsessed, passionate about helping product teams get there, get to number four, minimum number three, but really you need to be on number four. So I mentioned earlier, right? What are some things you can do right now, do this week? And the first one is writing, documenting, right? Writing down your durable context, right? Whether you have the capability to truly build out that context layer, start simple, write it down, right? Um, and start there, and then measure the specifically the re-explaining tax. Every time you have to tell this to an engineer, for instance, every time maybe the engineer comes back and says, "Wait a minute, what is this doing? Why does this do this?" That's the re-explaining tax. Every time you do that, just make a check mark, right? For 1 week, you're doing this, and then change what done means for a spec. I don't love the word spec here for your context, for your requirements, right? And done should mean that an agent can execute it without a human translating it first. Now, everybody, every software team, every product team that I've spoken with in the last 3 to 6 months is doing some level of AI coding. So this is a good chance to really understand your capabilities there. Where are you? Um, so yeah, make that the definition that your requirements aren't done until um, you could just seamlessly hand it off to a coding agent um, without the human translating. Then really focusing on one signal, right? Again, we want to make this a nice kind of easily actionable activity here. So pick one signal. Maybe it's customer interviews. Maybe it's data around the problem you're solving. But try to focus on one signal. And even if you're doing this manually right now, which likely you would if you didn't have a system to do this, but just continually pull in any signal you have around this issue, and that durable context that you documented. Okay, keep adding to it with this process, and then finally, close the loop on something you shipped. Now, you may not have, we're saying do this for a week. You may not be able to truly measure the outcome, by the end of that first week, because you might need some time in production. But that's just the last piece of this to pull this together. Did it move the outcome? Did you deliver on that outcome as defined by a success metric, right? And if most importantly, if not, why? That's because you want to try to do everything you can to nail that on the first try, but it's going to take some time to get there. So likely you're going to either be off maybe significantly or at least off a little bit from that desired outcome. Understanding why is going to be one of the, if not the most important learning from this activity. And just again, you know, I I mentioned you probably don't have a system, at least that does it in this way. Do this by hand. Put it in a doc, right? Put it in a spreadsheet, whatever. But just document it and go through this activity, and it's amazing how much you'll learn. All right, now let's talk about Velocity, right? The AI product operating system that's driven by what we call the context suite. These are really the three parts of the workflow, or what really ties this together, right? I've talked a lot about the context layer already, and that's product intelligence, right? It never resets, it compounds. Every time you run anything through what we'll talk about next, this context loop, basically just using this product operating system is continually compounding and making your context layer, your product intelligence, smarter every time. The context loop is the loop through the activities, right? You're doing discovery, both foundational discovery and continuous discovery. You're generating context, you're aligning with your strategy, and you're building. And a kind of assumed in the build is the deploy side of that as well, right? We're just for purposes of this wrapping that up into build, and that's what the loop is running through: discovery, context, strategy, build, and it's tying this all together. Now, the most important piece in this AI era that we're in right now is the context dispatch. That's how you take this context layer, how you take these actionable things you decide you want to build because it's based on and grounded on a problem that you're solving. It aligns with your strategy. You know who it's for. You've run an experiment to prove or disprove some assumptions. You've raised your confidence in this is the right thing to build, right? Based on everything we talked about, on your context and your strategy. The context dispatch is just the simple way to make that seamlessly passed off to AI coding agents, and it supports anything. I give examples here in Cursor and Claude, any coding agent. And there's a couple of ways that you can invoke the context dispatch, but the way that engineers really want to do this is through MCP. So we built an MCP server that you're essentially connecting to and saying, what's ready for me? And it just pulls that in and starts the session. That's that's what the AI operating system looks like. That's the core value that we provide. I already talked about the context loop. So this just kind of gives a little bit of a visual, but again, it loops through that process. Think of it looping through the PDLC, right? Your product development lifecycle. So now I'm going to jump in. I'm going to stop sharing the deck for a minute, and I'm going to switch over and show you on a live system here. So I'm going to start with kind of the discovery or the signal side of things. There's a number of ways you get context into the Velocity platform, and it starts with foundational discovery. Who are your personas? What are the jobs to be done? What are the core problems you're solving? There's a whole kind of onboarding or foundational discovery process that in this case, assume that's already there because we have run that process. Here, the ideas and feedback board is meant to collect. You can manually add things here. You can upload. We have some integrations. So getting that data, customer feedback, maybe a customer interview, all of that data is it's signal, it's discovery, it's data that we're pulling in, it's context that we're pulling in. I can our insights agent will every 24 hours it'll kind of crawl or index through all of this data to generate insights. So an example is, and I should say for context here, this system uses a fictitious kind of testing as a service platform. I call it Testio. There are real companies that do this or something very similar, but I just picked this fictitious one. So think of it as it's a platform for companies, for software companies to use to run testing. And optionally, you can have kind of gig QA engineers or fractional QA engineers. That's what this is around. A lot of this feedback is talking about, look, doing load testing is expensive, right? To truly simulate that load and see how your system performs under load, it's expensive and it's always been challenging. So we added some customer interviews and feedback that talked about that challenge. So our insights agent essentially came up with this and said, look, we should create the ability to run load testing, right? Number of customers are asking for it. It's high demand for CTOs and talks about kind of what the value is to the CTO, right? They have to manage costs. They can't go acquire infrastructure and all the things it might take to do that. So based on that insight, you can create a new initiative, right? You could link to an existing initiative. Maybe you already thought about this, but you want to connect this feedback. You can add a new persona. Maybe this exposed a persona that you hadn't previously been aware of, and so on, right? So I already went through this process and generated well, there's a number of initiatives here, and I'll just show you one example, but what I wanted to really show was how that context, there's a number of ways where that gets in. And once it runs through the loop, so all of the existing context and the new context that came in through customer interviews and things, it ran through the loop. And part of that loop is generating an initiative. An initiative is what's kind of actionable, what you'll build on the platform, right? This is an example of one. I already ran the context dispatch here. So when an engineer connects through the MCP server, they would see this specific initiative is ready to build, and all of that context was generated, packaged up, and is just handed off to that coding agent. That's how you would take direct action against this. Now, the context layer, it's kind of hard to visualize that in one place because it doesn't live in one place. But I'm just going to show a few things. We for every workspace we generate a canvas, and this is kind of similar to the lean canvas, much more expansive. But this is where your personas live and your jobs to be done and your competitors and so on. There's so much rich data or context about your problem space, and this continually gets updated. And it continually gets updated from a number of sources. When you bring in that context data and the insights agent processes it, it updates this. So it's continually compounded. When you create a new initiative, some of the context through that initiative, the results, right, after you build, all of that is continually updating this context layer. We do problem mapping, which, if you're familiar with opportunity solution trees, very similar. And essentially, it starts with a problem, breaks it down to a desired outcome, one or more opportunities to deliver that outcome, an experiment you should run, and then ultimately breaks down to initiatives, which are the actionable thing here. Every initiative generated on the platform, we run a story map. We connect it to a persona, to like the primary. There may be multiple personas that would get value from this feature, but we connect it to who we believe is the primary, and the agent automatically generates user stories for the cards in this story map. So all of that, and we also, by the way, build a theme-based strategy that has its outcome, desired outcome. This is where the success metric is, and so on. I don't want to overwhelm everyone here, but I just wanted to kind of give a glimpse into what that context looks like and how it presents. Because again, the initiative is the actionable thing and it draws from all of that context. Then you build with that context dispatch. So that was a quick view of the platform and how it works. Again, with the focus on context and the context layer, and making that easily actionable, building with AI. Okay, like I mentioned, right? That was rungs 3 and 4, right? That was kind of the holy grail here. A living context layer, right? And dispatchable and traceable, right? It should not only be easy and seamless to build that with coding agents, but however it was built, coding agents or engineers working out of a backlog, it's traceable, right? And it's traceable back to what was the desired outcome? What problem were you solving? How would you measure success of this? And if it didn't hit on that, what went wrong, right? Because knowing what to build next based on the success or failure of any individual initiative, that's the framework. So I'll kind of end with this, kind of getting to questions in a second here, but want to come full circle, right? When everyone, and I mean everyone, can build anything. That's the world we live in, right? The only scarce thing is knowing what to build because it's worth building because it solves a real problem, right? From a product manager perspective, that's always been the job, but it was really hard to do. And it gets in one way, it gets a lot harder with AI because of coding agents, because you just can't keep up with discovery, right? But AI also made it easier and better to do discovery and to generate that context if you build a system to do that, right? So we've kind of, maybe a bit harsh to say we removed the excuse, because I don't think it's ever been, laziness or incompetence on product managers' side. They've just been overwhelmed and really haven't had the system to do it. Now we do. So three quick takeaways, right? Run that scorecard. I really think that's going to be valuable for you, right? Run that scorecard. Check out Velocity. You could sign up for a free trial. There's no credit card required. It's simple and you could get going, right? then tell me your level, right? If we're not already connected on LinkedIn, let's connect on LinkedIn. You can just reply to also to the invite that was sent out, right? That came from me. Would love to have that conversation, but I'd love to understand, um, you know, take the scorecard, try things out, and what's blocking you. And I'd rather fix the context challenge that you have than just not even have an attempt at context. We got about 5 or 6 minutes here. Let's look at any questions.
Anthony, so we have one question here. The question is, what context is included in the context dispatch?
Yeah,
We're
so
not getting down into the weeds.
yeah, no, for sure, and that's a great question. So I'll kind of there's a lot, right? And the broad answer is it's all of the all of the context around the what and why. But I just wanted to start broad. But now let me go a little deeper. It is, who are you building this for, right? Who is the persona? What are their pain points and jobs to be done? All of that, right? So it's really, there's so much that is around the who, but what challenge are they having? Not just, oh, the user needs a dashboard because they don't have a way to easily see all of their key metrics or something, right? It's yeah, it's the problem they have is pick a role, right? Say I'm a sales rep and you're building a CRM or some kind of go-to-market solution, right? It's not just, well, okay, the persona is a sales rep and they need a dashboard. It's the sales rep are constantly they're overwhelmed with data. They're running demos. They're sending out cold emails, whatever they're doing, and they can't keep track of that, right? And it's causing them to lose deals because they're not following up, right? It's going deep. That's the level of who, for, and what problem. Certainly, optionally, you can add design. So if you connect to your Figma system, you upload a design image. Um, It'll have all the detailed rules and structure around the design, right? It has the strategy. This is why we're building it, to align with this overall strategy. This is the outcome we're looking for, not just deliver that feature that we talked about for this, in this case, this sales rep, but we need to have, it might increase engagement, it might increase revenue, retention. What is that desired outcome and how are you measuring it? And then again, put some constraints around, um, not necessarily technical, that is left to the coding agent and the engineer, but if the existing system works this way, here's some constraints. It has to fit into the existing things. So it's pretty broad. It's very deep in everything about who this is for, the problem you're solving, and ultimately, how should that happen? Again, not from a tech perspective, but from a functional and constraint perspective.
We have one more question if we have time. How is really Velocity better than building this yourself with an LLM or agents?
Yeah, great, another great question. And by the way, this, as an aside, this is who we compete with now, right? We used to compete with other product management solutions, but the industry has kind of moved to trying to build things themselves. And you could build this, and maybe you could build something decent, right? But we've purpose built this system, right? So, without kind of patting ourselves on the back or being a little bit too bold here, I'll just say it. You're probably not going to build something as just valuable and that works as well as we did, because this is all we do, right? We purpose built this solution. So it's really hard and you may never get there. But then you have to maintain it, right? If you're a product team, you're supposed to be building revenue generating features, right? You're a software company. That's what you're there for. You don't want to be bogged down with building your own system and having to maintain it. We see this all the time. Token costs quickly get out of control, right? And you're worrying about things that just aren't what your role is. Your role is to build products. So it's really hard to build, really hard to maintain. It gets extremely expensive, and then ultimately it just pulls you away from your main job.
We have one more question. So will I be able to connect it with multiple CLIs and keep this as a primary source of truth?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is, one of the many values, but one of the core values of that context dispatch, right? We want to make that context layer. It's the source of truth. So we have to make it consistent, seamless, and support anything. If you have a coding agent, I mean, heck, it doesn't have to be a CLI, but that's what engineers are going to use. But any coding agent, any CLI that is, AI powered to and can connect to an MCP server. So we've tested this with many, and the great thing is every engineer in your team could theoretically use a different coding agent, but they're still working from the same source of truth, and they're building consistently. We all see this, right? Both pre and post AI, that if you're building off of a different set of rules and constraints, it just leads to very messy products and code bases. We're very consistent and just agnostic to the tool that you use.
Awesome. Well, Anthony, I really appreciate your time and thank you all so much for your time. And please look forward to actually receiving the recording of the session. And please, I invite you to go to the website and to actually register the free sign up and take it for a spin. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.